This podcast is all about the skills that people pick up in the radio industry that make them valuable in other careers. And in the conversations we've had so far with people like a small business owner, an author, a couple of voice artists, a filmmaker and more, we've certainly picked up some of that. We've also got some yarns about life in the radio trenches. So in this episode, we'll get some business wisdom, a couple of heartfelt stories, and just a little sprinkling of...
How badly can I swear?
Let's do this. Firings and kups. It's the final episode of Season 1 of Off Mic, Life After Radio. One thing that seems to be on every radio person's mind in 2025 is, am I about to lose my job in a corporate restructure? Well, former ABC presenter and now best-selling author Mary Lou Stevens has heard that song before.
People said, oh gosh, you're going to have such a great time at the ABC and they'll have all the latest equipment and you'll get treated really well. And let me tell you, nothing could have been further from the truth. I dropped back into the land of cartridges. We didn't have ads, but we had promos on cartridges. We did actually have turntables in the studio. There were no computers. Nothing was computerized. I'd say for a year, though, it was my absolute dream job. I was on the Sunshine Coast. I couldn't believe that I'd landed a job as music director for Sunshine and Gold Coast, being on air, on drive, not breakfast. Hurrah. So, yeah, I was really happy, but then we got restructured. The first time we got restructured, the first time of many restructures.
What's the feel around the building when there's a big restructure that's just happened?
So I'd say the first one was just appalling. Management did actually apologise for the way they dealt with it because we were a sister station to the Gold Coast, but we got these phone calls from down there going, something's going on, but we don't know what it is. No one in management will talk to us. We don't know what's happening. And we were completely left in the dark until these guys in suits with laptops showed up and told us that none of us had jobs anymore and we would have to reapply if we wanted our jobs back. And here's the number for the counselling service. Because we're the ABC and we care. My very wise friend said, you might actually even end up with a better job out of this. And that's pretty much what happened for a little while. But then we had a manager who was such a bully that I was driven to meditation and ended up my first book with a major publisher called Sex, Drugs and Meditation. And that was my story about how I saved my job, changed my life, and found a husband all through meditation. But honestly, the ABC drove me to meditation.
It can't be a bad idea to occasionally have a think about how you want your life to look and decide for yourself whether radio continues to be a part of that picture. Recently retired communications coach Geoff Fisher did just that.
It really came down to what did I want out of life? I actually had a conversation with Jeff Ellis when he was Group Program Director of Austereo on a Friday one day, and was offered the opportunity to move from Canberra into the Austereo network fully, which would have meant moving to Newcastle originally. And I said to Jeff, look, great, thank you for the opportunity. Can I just talk with my wife about it over the weekend? On the Saturday, we found out my wife was pregnant with our second child. And it was that case of we were connected here, and we wanted to remain here while we went through, the birth of my daughter, who, is now grown up and engaged. So I rang Jeff on the Monday morning and said, thank you so much for the offer, but I'm going to turn it down on this occasion. Not sure that anybody had ever really turned Jeff down on a job offer at that stage. But it was about, for us, that was an important time of our life. As the kids started to grow and were embedded in various things, it all came down to, well, what do we want? And I remember a morning, I reckon my son was probably about 4, wasn't at school yet, and my daughter would have been about 2. And we'd been through a pretty horrendous time. My daughter didn't learn about sleep until she was about 4 years old. She didn't know it had been invented. And so, we were living on no sleep for a few years. At work, I was pretty full on. We had a pretty new breakfast show on 104.7 and, a lot of work going into that. We were just about to go into survey. It was a full on time. And I remember one morning, about 6:45 in the morning, I was listening to a break on one of the breakfast shows, and my son, he was an early riser, and he was up with me. And he came up and he said, "Dad, can you get these bits of Lego apart?" And I turned around to him and said, "Mate, you've interrupted me. I'm trying to listen to this, and you're just going to have to wait till Mum gets up and we can deal with it." And it was a really poor thing of me to say, and I'm not proud of that. And he just looked at me. And as, the wisdom of a child, Andy, he said to me, "Why do you always go to work so early?" And about 10 minutes later, I did the handover to my wife and I got in the car and I'm driving to work, and I thought to myself, why do I always go to work so early? And it wasn't about the hours. I never, ever minded doing long hours. And, subsequently, and in the job that I've just come out of in consulting, I do long hours. It's never about the hours. What it actually was about what I wanted out of life. I just put my job way ahead of my family. And I reflected on that. It came down to, actually, we're pretty settled here in Canberra, or well connected into the community. My wife had a great job. And to go programming in metro markets probably would have been a whole lot of stress on that. And that would be about me rather than about my family.
And so Geoff got a graceful exit from the radio industry. But not everyone's exit is so graceful. I had a chat to filmmaker Matt Schichter on how he and his workmates all simultaneously reached the end of the road with one radio station. I used to listen to you on the radio over here because your afternoons were my mornings.
Right.
So
sure.
when so I used to get out of bed at whatever o'clock, and I'd turn on. I had this little digital radio that had an internet thing, so I'd just play it in the kitchen as I was making my coffee. And it was a great sounding radio station. But then one day, and how's this for sucky, dear listener? I turn on the radio, and it's all Christmas music.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But it wasn't Christmas time.
That was the stunt to let people know there was a change.
It just seemed to me to be a deliberate listener burning.
Yeah.
It was a really weird act.
I think they really wanted to say, this is going to be different. I just remember all of us, I think we started, we did. We started with the Foo Fighters Band on the Run cover, and we ended with the Foo Fighters Band on the Run cover. And all of us stood on the board to push that last, and I think I got to hit the button, and that was the last one. And then it was fucking Christmas music after that. But it was that's how much that station meant to everyone. We all went into the room to go play this last song.
So there's heartbreaking stories like that. And then there's real heartbreak with the loss of a friend and workmate. Voice artist Cecelia Ramsdale spoke to me about her time on Triple M shortly after the loss of Richard Marsland. We do speak on the topic of suicide here for the next 2 minutes.
So Richard was a comedian. He was a radio nerd from way back. He was so good at radio, so good, one of the best. He was really interested in the craft, like you say about the comedy shows. He had a really good ear for things. He was really dedicated, but if you do listen to the Get This podcast, Richard features heavily, and you can tell how wonderful he was. I used to always say to him, and he always apologized, and I'd say, Richard, you might only have a limited number of sorries. Don't use them all up on this. You don't need to be sorry. It's okay. He ended up working on the breakfast show with Miff Warhurst and
Peter Hellier
that next year. And then at the end of that year, he died. He passed away, and it was his choice. So it was gut-wrenching. Absolutely gut-wrenching. I mean, who knows what goes through someone's mind when that happens, and you can try and figure it out forever and a day, and even all these years later, it still gives me goosebumps to think about it. But it really did change something in my mind about working there. I just couldn't, it was kind of the catalyst. I mean, it wasn't the reason, but it was the catalyst. And I was like, I just don't feel like I can be here anymore.
Yeah.
With him not here. And I know that sounds really stupid because we weren't that close, really. We worked together and we were mates, but we weren't close mates. But I absolutely adored him. And he was always so supportive and wonderful.
he was a very large figure in the Pete and Miff show, and it kind of, I mean, they finished the very last thing of their last show was replaying one of his sketches. So there was that show never really recovered from that either.
No. Yeah, and again, to this day, everyone who knew him still has a very big Richard-sized part of their heart because he really was one in a million.
Rest in peace, Richard. Still to come on the podcast, sweary rock stars, taking a breakfast show off the air, and a mistake so big it took 2 people to make it happen.
The whole thing went to air, so they were both fired.
If anyone deserves the dream radio career, it's someone as talented as voice artist Simon Kennedy. But then, life's not like that, is it?
I got a show on the weekends as well with my good friend Steve Philp, who's also a comedian, stand-up comedian, and and we were on air. We had a good following, and they moved us to Saturday morning breakfast. So we did Saturday morning breakfast, which we called it was just called Kennedy and Philp.
You would have been up against another 2 people with an ampersand between them as well, and you were outrating them, I understand.
We did actually. Yeah, we were up against Hamish and Andy, who are great. You know, they're wonderful.
Yeah, and how long were you at Nova for all up?
I think I was up maybe 7 years. You know, eventually my goals and those of my management at Nova were very different.
Okay.
So, you know, you go through different bosses, and some of them you'd work for free.
Yeah.
And then some of them you couldn't pay me enough. No. I won't name names, but I went into the person in Power's office. I sat down and said, look, the station sound is changing a lot. And like, you're not using the character and personality that I've built over the years anymore. In fact, you're backseating that stuff. I'm thinking, how about I wind back on my imaging work and ramp up on air, because I really want to be on air more, And he said, how about you not on air at all and just more imaging? And I'm like, oh, this is a good chat. And I think that was one of those moments where he probably wanted me to leave. But I was quite fine with that because I'm like, yeah, I'll go. So I went out, typed up a resignation, slapped it on his desk, and really great idea because my wife was pregnant with our first child, and I hadn't even discussed it with her. But I went, well, I'm just going to do voiceover and I'm going to do comedy.
Yeah.
And I had more time to do voiceover and I was more available. Mm-hmm. And funnily enough, Nova still needed my voice on air because I was on air, in quite a few states still, and I was still part of the sound. So I got to go in still every week, maybe twice a week, and still get paid. So it actually was a really kind of handy transition. So I still got the money and I didn't have to deal with the garbage. I just walk in, read the stuff and go.
I remember when I quit one radio station, I'd forgotten about this. I saved a resignation template in Microsoft Word on the main computer near reception that everybody used at the time. Apparently it got a little bit of use. While we're on the topic of abrupt exits, let's talk to business owner Kerryn Marlow about her last radio station.
It got bought out by this new management. I think it was, a bunch of lawyers or something, and they brought their own people on board. And the only way I found out that I'd lost my job was I heard a promo. I actually played my own promo on air to say, whoever the new announcer was starting Monday from 6 till midnight on 3AK. And I'm like, but that's my shift.
Oh,
okay.
Wow.
Right. So I actually phoned Mel Garvin at night.
Yeah.
And I said, what the hell's going on here? It was awful. Like that.
That's
just
savage.
dodgy. In my opinion, they were just dodgy management. So I just said, basically gave them the finger.
Yeah.
I'm out.
I can understand that.
Yeah. And I thought, where can I go from here? Have I had my run? The next logical step would have been maybe the ABC. I could apply there, but I thought, I've come to the end of my radio career. I need to do something else. I'm ready to move on.
So that's how Kerryn left her last radio job. But there was also a little bit of backstory about how she got her first.
I clearly remember how hard it was getting into radio being a woman. And I remember the program director I think he was at 3BA at that stage. I can't remember his name, but he said to me, "Oh, we've already got a lady here." I know. And I said to him, but you've got guys there as well.
Yeah.
That to me was just bizarre.
Yeah.
Because there was that old myth that, no, women are too shrill for radio and people just don't like listening to women. Like, where's the research for that? There is none. And plus, women weren't on radio hardly anyway. So show me the money, show me the research. And I got a call from the program director at 2PK, and they had 2 jobs going.
2PK being in Parks in New South Wales. Yeah.
Yes, the home of the telescope, the dish. The reason why there were 2 jobs going, there was actually 1 job originally.
What happened?
Well, they had this automation system there, probably one of the earliest automation systems. And I know you interviewed Geoff Fisher, who's an old friend of mine, and Geoff worked there as well. So Geoff, you'll remember this very well.
Yeah.
So it's just hours of music recorded onto these video cassettes.
Yeah.
And there was the bottom one that was for voice. So we used to have to go in and do voice tracks and you pulse it and all that, and it all worked.
I remember when I first started at 104.7 in Canberra, they would put an entire show and just replay the entire show on a tape. So they're doing bits and pieces on tape.
Yeah, we had a music log and
and it all syncs up.
Yeah, do voice bits and then pulse it.
Yeah.
Like stop and start pulses, which of course would kick off all the tapes. Now, the reason why the 2 jobs came up is because what the jocks, and I don't even know what their names are. One of them recorded some salacious acts that he did with somebody in town, and that all went to air.
Oh.
Because the other jock, the second jock who got fired, pushed the tape in and didn't cue it up to the stop pulse. The whole thing went to air, so they were both fired. The rumour was that the program director had that tape in his safe.
Yeah.
And I don't know who's heard it, but there was a lot of money offered to hear that tape. If you ever interview Neil Maney, Neil, where's the tape?
Speaking of things we'd love to hear, video editor, voice artist and YouTube car reviewer Alex Dalrymple probably has this gem saved on a folder somewhere.
On the American Rosso show, we had Duran Duran come in. They were on tour and they came in live for a chat. Simon Le Bon was on the mic and I played their big intro, it was a big music montage and that kind of thing, and I turned his mic on. He didn't realise that his mic was on and that he was on air live, and he goes, "So what's the deal with this? In Australian radio, we can say words like f***ing, can't we?"
Oh, man. Yeah.
And Rosso just calls a cucumber, goes, "Well, you just have." And Simon, for the next 5 minutes of the interview, was just standing there going...
When someone goes to start a story with,
"How badly can I swear?"
you know you're in for something good. Here's marketing executive Stephen Walter Gerard.
The worst stuff up I made was we had carts when I was starting out.
Yep, the actual physical cartridges, yep.
And I was in Tamworth, and cart machines used to skip from time to time. And when you have a festival that's called the Tamworth Country Music Festival, and the cartridge skips and says, "You're listening to the coverage of 2TM's." And I was just like, "Oh, no, please. How do I do it? How do I stop this?"
Oh, man.
And I was like, fader down, music up. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes swear words keep radio people up at night, but then sometimes it's silence that keeps them awake. Let's go back to Alex Dalrymple.
One day I took the show off air and...
What happened?
We were playing a pre-recorded interview with, at what at the time we didn't know was going to be one of the last ever interviews with Michael Hutchence. So that was being played out while Andrew was pre-recording something else in the live studio next door.
Yeah.
And Dobbo came in to me in the other studio where I was paneling saying, mate, do you know how this interview ends? Have you listened to the end of it? And so I thought, oh, no, I haven't. I'll do that now. And The interview was playing out of Car Track, which was the old touchscreen system that used to work with DCS. And it had a thing...
DCS.
Yeah, there's a flashback for you.
So much DOS prompt.
If you know what DCS is, it's probably time for a colonoscopy. It had a thing. I don't know if it only
resemble that remark.
I don't know if it only had one sound card or something like that, but if you tried to preview something else while another thing was playing, it would just kill everything. So I did that, and it stopped the interview going to air. And Richard Krusty Mortlock, who was the producer of the show, started screaming out at the top of his lungs, "We're off the air! We're off the air!" And I remember I hit the INXS song, and Dobbo was apoplectic. Like, the Denton show was still really new, and everyone was still getting to know each other. And, "Mate, you've got to go and apologise to Andrew. What were you doing? You know, this is..." And I was just seeing my radio career end in front of me. I was 19 years old and thought, this is it. I'll never work again. And ever since that day, whenever I run into Dave Gibson, which is a couple of times a year, he's a mate, the first thing he'll always say to me is, "We're off the air, we're off the air."
We certainly are. We've reached the end of season 1 of Off Mic Life After Radio. Thank you so much for coming along for the ride. Please feel free to check out the previous episodes and do the like, share, subscribe stuff. That'd be ace. But what I'd really love out of you is a little bit of information to help me make season 2 even better for you. What have you been enjoying more out of these episodes? Do you like the career insights, or have you been enjoying the war stories like we've shared in this episode? Please, would you mind letting me know? Leave a comment in YouTube or Spotify. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can contact the podcast on Instagram, Facebook, or Blue Sky. Just look for the podcast name, Off Mic, Life After Radio. I'm Andy Marr, and until season 2, may your best years be ahead of you.